So if you would all care to take a seat, thank you for joining us. We are going to begin, I'm a journalist after all, so we're going to begin this panel with some breaking news, a special FII announcement. Deanne Eisnor over here to my left, about 30 minutes ago, sold her company, Cruise by Core, to WakeCap, a leading IoT platform for construction project management. Literally was just inked right here. And let me tell you a bit of the backstory before we go to Deanne. Both CEOs met in Saudi. They reconnected at FII Miami. I was there to witness it in February. 5 months later, the companies have signed an acquisition deal here at FII Rio. This represents one of the first acquisitions of a Silicon Valley startup by a Saudi tech company. This is what FII is all about, ladies and gentlemen. Deanne Eisnor, how are you feeling? And tell us about why this represents the spirit of FII, the meaningful connections that are meant to be made here, and especially this fascinating deal truly represents the topic of our panel, which is the future of industry.
Well, I've always thought that, particularly in this moment of geopolitical divide, that one of the best ways that we can have, we can look at diplomacy is through how we cross borders as we do business. And I'm very excited about what is happening in Saudi as it relates to the construction industry. This is a $12 trillion industry, and no one is doing it at the size and scale of Saudi. So I am really thrilled. My team is excited. We have a very, very strong technology, and to be able to think about deploying it at this scale is very exciting for us. And I think together the two companies now have a complete platform that starts with large, complex projects in Saudi, and then we take them global. We're already in the US and Japan, and together we have quite a nice footprint. So the idea is cross-country collaboration, and I'm very excited.
Congratulations.
Thanks,
Deanne.
and relieved.
Yes, yes, yes. Ronnie, on to you. Help us set the stage a bit here. Do you think that the traditional industry model with these clear boundaries, defined sectors, is becoming outdated? What are you seeing at GIP?
Yeah, no, it's being in infrastructure. I think when people think about infrastructure, they think about sort of 19th century technology of a road or a bridge or other things. But when we look at the things that are most exciting in the world, whether it be decarbonation or AI and digitization, it's really an intersection with infrastructure. So, for example, we own a large data center platform, which is obviously very important to AI as it's growing. But within the context of a data center, one of the most important elements is power. And so how are you going to have, today the world doesn't have enough power to power the needs of the cloud and AI. At the same time of transitioning, the energy transition. And so the infrastructure, the energy transition alone is a $100 trillion opportunity. AI is another hundreds of trillions of dollars. And so the intersection of what we do and the things that are driving the basic infrastructure like power and water and other things that are needed to move these things ahead, it's very exciting. And the technologies around producing that power or producing that energy are also evolving very rapidly.
Ronnie, and you also have a background in advertising and marketing at Omnicom. Tell us about the blurring of industry lines in that sector briefly.
Yes, I mean, I'm on the board of Omnicom, which is the largest marketing advertising holding company in the US. Not because of my expertise in advertising, but really because of my expertise in global business and my expertise in finance and other things. But it's surprising, even in that context, that it's a business that people watch, Super Bowl commercials and think, oh, that's what an ad agency does. That's about 15% of revenue. It's really about analytics. It's about data. It's about branding and other things that are highly digital and highly evolving in terms of technology. So, the things that, even the way we think about things as, Mad Men is sort of what people have in mind as advertising. It's more of, people doing programmatic analytics on a supercomputer than what it was in Mad Men. So things are definitely evolving in a different way.
Rick, on to you now, and I've had the pleasure of interviewing you in the past. What are you seeing now in terms of industrialization from a Chinese perspective?
Well, thank you for the question. Mr. Atias, thank you for having me. And you're the true nexus of putting multiple cultures and continents and peoples together. Appreciate it. I think the world is getting a little interesting. We used to have socialism versus capitalism. But now if you look at the United States, being the leader of the West, I see a lot of industrial policies. I see subsidies, what the Chinese used to be doing against the rest of the world very smartly. And then if you go to China, India, and some other emerging markets, you see capitalism like there's no tomorrow. So I think the socialism with Chinese characteristics and capitalism with American characteristics are now having a level of convergence, which is very interesting. This is inevitably going to horizontalize a lot of things. If you're a major multinational corporation, you should no longer look at regions vertically. You should look at things horizontally and more geographically and geopolitically. This will also result in a lot of unique skills leaders have to have that they may not have in the past, which is understanding the interconnectivity between government, policy, and also entrepreneurship and the supply and demand in the freest market economy, which is being twisted and tweaked every single day. I think that's going to result in a lot of confusion, but also a unique level of opportunities for those who are very comfortable dealing with ambiguity and asymmetry in information and access.
What you're saying is fascinating because this panel is called The Future of Industry, about the blurring of industry lines and sector lines, but you're talking about also the blurring of ideologies in a way.
Yeah, you have to be comfortable. When I build my senior management team or even recruit people who are fresh out of college, I think the most important skill I want them to demonstrate is that they don't have to have a work chart. They don't have to be obsessed with a training manual. And they're comfortable going to unknown territories and uncharted waters and try to demonstrate their comfort. If that's really the skill set number one, I think they're going to become a great leader in the future. This is a world full of populism, nationalism, strongman politics, and very, very blunt geopolitics. I think we have to kind of tear apart everything that we built as past rules and really figure out what this world will be like. I also think in addition to government dialogue, in a world like that, people in the private sector, like many of you, and also in civil society, like many of you, can play a very instrumental role.
Vinay, over to you now. Deanne told us the global construction industry is an $11.4 trillion industry globally. That's the industry you're in with Teleo. How is AI impacting the construction industry, and what do you foresee going forward?
Yeah, so first of all, it's an honor to be on this panel and to witness firsthand the breaking news as well. Congrats, Diane, again. First of all, what is Teleo? So Teleo builds we're building a construction robotics company where we convert large construction machines like bulldozers, wheel loaders, trucks into teleoperated and autonomous machines. And we let a single operator sitting hundreds of miles away control multiple machines at the same time. This is only possible because we're able to bring AI and let those machines run autonomously so the operator can take the eyes off that machine and do something else. And what this means is that we are fundamentally changing the nature of how construction gets done in the world, right? And really our vision and our hope is that in a few years' time, every machine in the world operates in this manner.
If you haven't had the opportunity to check out Teleo, I was seeing what you do, and it's literally people that used to operate construction machinery. Now it's almost that they're doing gaming.
They're playing a game.
and the machines are operating themselves with the use of AI.
That's right.
So it's truly, truly innovating. And Diane, in a way, this sort of reimagines the blue-collar job of a construction worker. What Vinay is doing, what you are doing. Tell us about some of the stereotypes and misconceptions in some of these industries, especially constructions, that now need to be reimagined thanks to emerging technologies.
Yeah, well, this is a topic I care a lot about, but we have 200 million people working in construction around the world. And in the past, it's been very unsafe jobs, dirty jobs, and we're having a kind of a crisis of a labor shortage because people just don't want these jobs anymore. And we just, I think in the US alone, we're short 500,000 workers or something like that today. And so how do we recreate this culture of people wanting to come into construction? Well, we need to make it safe. We need to make it fun. And I think a lot about teaching our kids that the future of the construction worker is like a superhero. You're in an exoskeleton, you're doing this, and our work is more on the software side. So for us, AI is such an important tool that we have for construction. So our take on this is, within that giant industry, there's almost $1 trillion that is lost to commercial claims. There's a joke that the last phase of construction is the lawsuit. So what we're trying to do is take all that data that's out there, and it's data from the contract and from the schedule and from the worker information, put it together, and in an instant, you can make a fantastic decision on the ground. So that's not only going to save us almost $1 trillion of waste and that conflict from the lawsuits, but it's also going to help those workers be able to, what they would have to do it takes 32 hours to do the calculations we do, if you can even do it, and we do it in seconds. So that decision making on the job, I think, is also going to really help them. But I'm excited for our future construction workers, miners, when they don't have to take those risks and they can make more money and have a great living.
And just a personal anecdote from you, if I may, your family has a background in construction, which inspired you to do what you're doing now. Can you share a bit of that with us?
Yeah, well, everybody likes a humble root story, right? But my family was all truck drivers and construction laborers, actually. And so, after I sold Waze to Google and, found myself this very fortunate Silicon Valley person, I knew that the thing I would do when I left was to try to give back to those communities that meant so much to me. And now I get to do that and focus on the worker, and I'm on the board of trucking companies and marine transportation companies, and I spend a lot of my time thinking about making these industries better for the worker.
Thank you so much, Deanne. We've talked a lot about upskilling. Oh, thank you. That personal story and that commitment to give back deserves a round of applause. We've talked a lot about upskilling in this conference. 37% of workers worldwide fear that automation is going to take their jobs, but 74% will be willing to learn a new skill in order to remain employable. Vinay, on to you, since we're still talking about construction here. How does your technology give access to people that physically, maybe because of a disability, for example, could not even dream of a job in construction, but now they're able to do it because of what you're doing at Teleo?
Exactly. So I think our view of the world is that people worrying about AI completely taking jobs away is a little bit overblown and taken out of proportion. I think the reality of it is that going forward, we're going to have to find a sort of a bond between AI and humans. And that's also exactly how we approach it at Teleo, where it's not just the machine running autonomously end-to-end all the time, but rather it's a person supervising those machines and telling it where to go, telling it what to do specifically. And what this means is that it's suddenly just this one step where you go take the operator from the machine, where they're sitting for 8 hours, 10 hours a day, getting beat around, and take them into an office-like setting. Just that one step alone dramatically opens up the market. It makes these jobs way more accessible. Now, certainly for the first time, people who could not get on those machines physically are now able to get behind our control stations and actually operate those machines. Right? It opens up new doors. Imagine attracting the younger generation. Imagine attracting more women into the industry. Even folks who might have physical disabilities can now get behind our controls and operate these machines. And so this is really, I believe technology is ultimately the big equalizer, and this is a prime example of how this technology, AI specifically, is actually equalizing the access to these jobs for everybody.
And solving this issue of this challenge of finding skilled labor in construction, because right now what we're seeing, as Deanne pointed out, is more work than personnel that is available. Ronnie, I'd like to take it to you now. What strategies are you implementing at GIP to navigate this convergence of technology? And especially, I'm interested in the energy sector.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I mean, one of the great things about GIP is we're a company that people may use our services every single day and have no idea that GIP exists. So we were talking backstage or in the panel, and people, obviously when you turn the light switch on, no one's thinking about, hey, I wonder if GIP is involved in this. It's just the light comes on. But we have one of the largest, renewable portfolios in the world, probably huge platforms in Asia, in North America, in Latin America. And so what the need for energy is not just the energy transition, and particularly in the context of Latin America and the global south, it's about meeting demand for power in a clean way. So we're not just substituting equipment, we're enabling people to improve the quality of their life. And so when you kind of focus on that and from the abstract to really what it is that we're doing and providing, it's very powerful. And the other aspect of it is it's the electrification and the need for power across the world is growing and growing. And so we see brownouts and blackouts and other things happening not only in emerging markets but also in the US, in Texas during the summer and others. So as climate change takes its course and the need for power and cooling and other things increase, the challenge is there, again, a $100 trillion challenge. And as we do that, I think the other thing that we all have to be cognizant of is in trying to achieve those goals to make sure that we are doing it in harmony with communities, because to build a giant solar array somewhere, it needs land. It may be adjacent to a community, it may be adjacent to a farming area, and so understanding the needs of the communities that you are dealing with and sort of bringing solutions is also a big part of how we think about things. So decarbonization, new forms of energy, the evolution of dealing with communities and how they interact with these things are all very important. So we started, you started with small solar, you started with wind, we're now in the world of battery storage, and then we're moving from there to things like biofuels, which Brazil could be a superpower in. We're moving to things like green hydrogen, which is, again, a way to produce clean energy in one place and export it to other places. Saudi and other places have green ammonia and green hydrogen projects based on solar. So the globalization of energy is something that is new, because it tended to be something that was, I got my power from this electricity plant nearby. And so the scale of it is changing, the global nature of it, and the need and uses for it are all changing simultaneously. So it's a really incredible time to sort of be in this industry.
I love this takeaway of the globalization of energy, and we're going to get back to, how do you do this in a responsible manner? So I'm going to get back to you on that in terms of taking into account the communities in which you're working.
Yeah.
Rick, I want to get to you now. We were talking about geopolitics before, and these sort of shifting trends that we're seeing in places like China. What is the balance between sort of state-owned and the privatization of industries in China? What can you tell us about that, and what do you see is coming?
Yeah, well, I'm a US citizen. I've been in the US for 30 years, but before that I spent about 25 years in China and parts of Asia. My view of China in general is that it's a 5,000-year civilization going on 45. So what that means is, of course, it's a very long history there. There's a very rich content when you look at the history of China as a civilization. But the really opening up of China to the outside really started in 1978. So as an old civilization, but also very young at the same time, the country itself is actually very confused from time to time. So if an identity is very confused itself, it would be very difficult for the outside to also understand exactly how it behaves. Secondly, having been a very close observer to China geoeconomically and geopolitically, with some towering figures like Hank Greenberg, Henry Kissinger for the last 30 years, my observation is a learning country. At the end of the day, it's a very pragmatic country. So while we would like to impose ideology on countries like China, maybe a few others, we have to be very mindful of the pragmatic, enterprising nature of a civilization like that. Otherwise, we'll be backwards, and they're going to be going forwards and upwards. In order for the West to continue to be very competitive, there needs to be a lot of listening and understanding of civilizations like China's, India's, etc., and maybe the Middle East also, instead of feeling very complacent about what we have accomplished in the West. President Lula talked about Global South the other day. I think you could sense the passion of it. Of course, we also need policies and concrete ideas backing up, behind the passion to turn that into really results. But I think people in the United States and other parts of the world need to really put themselves in a situation to better understand. Even if we were to criticize countries like China, we better go to China, visit China, understand China better, and then we criticize. So the criticisms will be actually well-based. Now, based on that notion, I think we need to view China as really a country where they want to go across a river by feeling of the stones. It's inexperienced in the global order. It's not a very ready to go, a global leader yet on world stage, yet it got rich very quickly. And it certainly has a lot of power financially and with huge ambitions. So we need to work with China in such a way that when they say we have state-owned enterprises versus private enterprises, well, the reality is they always have a mix. The private sector in China has accounted for over 60%, 60% of the Chinese economy for a very long time, accountable for about 70%, if not more, of the job created in China. So, is it a state-owned, state-directed economy? By that metric, not really. In addition to state ownership and private ownership, I also look at China as supply-side economics when it comes to policy, and also demand-side economic policy. So it has been kind of like mixed and twisted between those two for a long time. So we need to avoid this black or white notion when it comes to China. There are always more than 50 shades of gray when you look at China. We just have to make sure that we kind of look at it with a very savvy and long-term perspective.
So we have you for those nuances. Thank you for that, Rick.
I'm here.
Vinay, over to you now. How do you see the balance between automation and human ingenuity evolving in your sector, in the construction industry?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I think it is going forward is going to be a cohabitation of AI with humans. I don't think it's one or the other. And so, across the board, if any of you have tried to type something into ChatGPT and it's given you garbage, and then you've changed your prompt and you've gotten actually what you want, that was an example of how a human brain and an AI was working together to get the end goal. I'm seeing more and more of that, I think, in the physical world. As you build robotics, you'll end up seeing that the combination of a human supervising a machine, an AI, and the AI doing what the human wants to do, and the human adjusting their inputs to take the AI where it needs to go. I think that's the way forward with this.
Thank you for that. In terms of the pool of capital in the room, the investors that are in the room, Vinay, I'm going to start with you. Where would you put your money right now?
That's an easy question for me. Yes. I would say, first of all, Teleo. but broadly speaking, I would say robotics in general, right? So I think you've seen what AI did. You saw in the last 1 year, the spark that AI has really lit in the world. And I think, honestly, that is a small fraction of what's truly possible. I believe that over the next decade, it's going to be the decade of robotics, where that AI is going to actually get embodied in something physical. It goes and physically does work in the world, moves material, builds something, and actually does things that are truly physically meaningful for all of the rest of us. So I think that's the place where I would think would get a huge amount of return over the next decade or so.
Can I take a shot at that question?
Go ahead, Rick.
Okay. Having been in finance for a very long time, I actually think all of the asymmetry, off-balance, concerns, anxieties, geopolitics are resulting in tremendous investment opportunities. For example, mental health. There are so many people so concerned about so many things, and people are under so much pressure, AI taking over humanity being one, for example. That's a huge, huge industry across its genders, ages, geographies, cultures. If anybody wants to invest, I would highly recommend mental health. By the way, I'm not a health-only investor. I'm just saying that, intuitively based on some of the opportunities we just talked about. I also think it's important to follow where capital flows before you invest. Money is the smartest animal, period. Not necessarily human in that regard. So if you really travel around the world today, where there are 70+ elections going on in just 1 year, that accounts for about 60% of the world's GDP and 50% of the world's population, and see where money actually ends up flowing and being parked, that will give you a lot of hint how you should invest yourself.
Mental health is obviously a huge sector, and we're even seeing that with teens and tweens. And in the United States right now, the best-selling book is called The Anxious Generation. So it's definitely going to be an issue, not only for us here in the room, but for Generation Z, for Generation Alpha. Ronnie, in terms of the skill set that is needed from leaders in this moment, the future of industry, with all of these blurring of the lines, what do you think are those critical skills that are needed?
I think in a world of increasing digitization and artificial intelligence, human skills are going to be very valued. And why do I say that? And global skills. And because of the globalization, the continued globalization, we talk about geopolitical tensions, but the world is not sort of going to go back very far, and we're too integrated to sort of do that. And so being able to, come to Brazil or go to Saudi Arabia or go to Germany or China or otherwise, and understand the needs and how we work together, I think that that's going to be a skill that is very, very important. And so the continued understanding of the perspectives of all of these different areas and countries are going to be something through experience and through education and other things that will make someone very valuable. I think beyond that, just having the resilience and the intellectual curiosity to continually learn is going to be something that we'll have to leave, because I know in my job what I was doing 10 years ago in power is completely different than what I'm doing today. And so if we don't have the sort of the grit to continue evolving along with the things that are going on, we become sort of dinosaurs very quickly.
So what do you think has allowed you to really stay resilient in these 10 years? Has been grit, has been, is it walk the walk? Is it actually, going to the place and having empathy and having the experience?
Yeah, and I think it's having a longer term and broader perspective. I do a lot in emerging markets. There are always issues. There are always ups and downs. There, engaging in community issues, all of those sort of things happen. And understanding that the world goes through cycles, but
Yes.
looking at it in the longer term rather than a 24-hour news cycle, or doom scrolling, as people like to call it. I think that having a longer term and more global perspective is helpful on all fronts.
And that was actually, for me, one of the most powerful takeaways from our Latin America entrepreneurship panel is this idea of this is a long-term play if you want to invest in this region, but in the inefficiencies, you find the opportunities. Deanne, I want to go to you now in terms of, amid these technological changes, the evolving industrial landscape, how do we make sure that people remain at the center of it with us being women, supportive family policies, pay, transparency, and something I know you're very passionate about, which are ownership opportunities?
So I think a lot about all the new money that's coming in and all the new industries. And I tend to think about it as, what is that next generation, that generation alpha, the 65% of jobs that don't exist today? And I think that the people in this room have a real opportunity to create a more perfect economy, because I'm all for wealth creation. I like it very much. But I do think it's gotten to a point where the finding new ownership opportunities for other people to bring them into those ownership classes is something that I really think about a lot right now. And I'll give you one example. Poor Elon, Tesla. I think that Elon has been constraining his growth. And the reason is because he's selling direct to consumer. And I love, the consumers can save money. I think I'm becoming an advocate of what I'm calling re-intermediation. And this is bring back those opportunities for people to have ownership stakes in these things. And my favorite model right now, franchise model. And it actually isn't about car dealerships or any of this. It is about how are we going to scale and accelerate vertical farming globally right away? Well, a franchise model might work for that. Lab-grown diamonds. Anything where there's a robot, right? So on the construction site, how do we maybe think about those models where there are local players who can have a different kind of ownership stake? And I think that if we can spend a little bit more time thinking about those new models, because in AI, we talk a lot about the technology, the social implications, and I could geek out on this all day long. I'm excited about the new economic models, the new economic landscape that we'll create with this new technology.
And that's time for us, and I love how you're thinking big, and all of you bringing your big ideas and your innovative approaches to FII. A big round of applause for our panel on the future of industry. Thank you so very much.